a 17-year-old male from Banks in Lancashire, who is originally from Cardiff, has been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder, and is being taken to a police station where he will be interviewed by detectives. My officers were called to reports of a stabbing at 11:47 this morning and at a address in Southport.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. The 17-year-old charged with murdering 3 girls at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in Southport has been named. Axel Muganwa Radukubana is also charged with 10 counts of attempted murder after 8 other children and 2 adults were seriously injured in the attack in Southport on Monday. Radukubana, who is due to turn 18 next week, according to the BBC, was remanded into youth detention accommodation. Before we get to the rest of this analysis, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're new to this channel, I have written numerous books on this type of incident. I'll put a link to them in the description. Incidentally, the teenager was previously not named due to his age, but the Recorder of Liverpool, Judge Andrew Menery, ruled that his identity could be made public. He actually said, continuing to prevent full reporting at this stage has a disadvantage of allowing others up to mischief to continue to spread misinformation in a vacuum. We've actually got a judge at this early point basically saying we have to say who it is, otherwise there's going to be misinformation. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So the judges acknowledged that his decision was exceptional, but he said the balance clearly comes down in favor of the public interest. In other words, we have to say who this person is in terms of, we normally want to protect the privacy of a minor, but in this case, we're going to have to say who it is because it's in the public interest. So what are we dealing with here? 3 children that have been killed and a teacher fighting for her life after this horrendous incident in Southport. 8 other children were also stabbed. 5 of these remain in critical condition in hospital, along with 2 adults who tried to protect them. Predictably, all media covering the incident are saying the same thing. They have no idea what the motive is here. Why did this happen? Now, we have been covering the motive. It's a well-trodden path now on this channel in our analysis of Thomas Crooks. Without even knowing the perpetrator's name, that's when I wrote the script. Without seeing his face, that's when I wrote the script. His motive ought to be obvious, and yet it isn't. Worse still, in the aftermath of this incident, there's been another incident, a whole far-right protest, which involved injuries to around 40 policemen. Injuries to 40 policemen and women. These protests are the result of disinformation regarding the perpetrator on social media. Because no one knew his name, people were making suggestions who it might be, which is another way of saying people talking about foul play in a way that is exaggerated, shocking, sensational, and simply not accurate. Where have we seen that happen before? I've been talking about reality and accuracy and anchoring information to facts in the Jay Slater case over the past couple of weeks. And you may think accuracy and credibility doesn't really matter. You may think it's all fun and games until it's not, until it's happening in your backyard. Thanks to online disinformation and treating social media as real news or as gospel, the local community of witch hunters are up in arms, apparently fighting for the rights of their fellow man, except they are armed with disinformation. And instead of coming to the rescue of the victimized society, this society is being re-traumatized, exactly as we saw in Jay Slater's case, where even the parents said, please stop, right? This is just on a much larger scale. It might be time to start taking the analysis on this channel.
Start taking things a little more seriously.
Okay, so what do we know about the suspect? First of all, he's a teenager. He's a young, emasculated male, 17 years old. Numerous witnesses have described him the same way: quiet, introverted, and also as a clingy mummy's boy. In one description in the Telegraph, he was described as very quiet, or in fact his entire family is very quiet. The dad would say, "Hello and how are you?" And then they said, "The lad was never out." The lad was never out. A former neighbor said the teenager being held by police had been an introvert as a child and clingy with his mother. From some descriptions, he sounds like he's almost invisible, doesn't he? With some neighbors not sure when they last saw him. According to an article in The Guardian, some said they knew of an adult couple who lived at the house, but most people had no recollection of the 17-year-old. A figure was filmed pacing outside a residential property in Banks in a green hoodie and COVID-style face mask shortly before the attack unfolded. And so that brings us to the next aspect. Is there a FOMO aspect, fear of missing out? Due to the young age of the perpetrator, I wonder whether there wasn't a frustrated immaturity inherent in the crime. Although I have my doubts that the perpetrator was a Taylor Swift fan per se, I do think his gripe was more with girls who had rejected him and with society by extension as well. I don't think he felt FOMO about missing out on Taylor Swift concerts, but perhaps more FOMO in general, missing out on life. And so his motive is to hit back at society for the pain, certainly how he has perceived it. Society has caused him. He blames society. And clearly the UK is reeling from this scar, this tear on the fabric of society. What do we know about the victims? All the victims, as far as I know, are female. They are mostly children, but also adults. This wasn't so much a targeted attack against one individual. In other words, it wasn't personal, although I'm sure it felt very personal both to the perpetrator and the victims. In reality, though, it has a symbolic motive, and it's for this reason the media and the authorities can't or won't be able to figure it out, because they simply never think in these terms. In effect, this was a crime perpetrated against multiple victims. The perpetrator was trying to inflict maximum casualties as a sort of payback for the perceived casualties he feels has been inflicted on his psyche, for the perceived emotional slights he has experienced from that same society. Do you see how it's a symbolic rendering? So in a real sense, his motive is to hurt society. What do we know about the protests? Well, they are based on disinformation. According to the New York Times, I think it was Keir Starmer who said, the person arrested was born in the UK and speculation helps nobody at this time. And so it was at this point that his identity was still not revealed. And so as a result of that, people were speculating. So we know the perpetrator was born in the UK. We know there may be an ethnic aspect. That's now, I guess, been confirmed to an extent. And there's no doubt the perpetrator was facing a social death situation, given his nature and the nature of his attack. Interestingly, a name that has been circulated on social media was incorrect. So people were going after the wrong person, thanks to social media. The event that the perpetrator targeted was circulated widely on social media, and we know the Taylor Swift Eras Tour is very high profile right now in the UK, it was in the USA and beyond. And so there's a very clear social media aspect to this, about a perception of people living and having fun via social media, and also people's perceptions of the perpetrator on social media. So there is a sense of people getting a sense of reality, not from the real world, but from social media, which is to say, a warped sense of reality. There also seems to be an ethnic aspect to this at a time when the UK and USA are terrified of immigrants, except that the perpetrator was born in the UK. So something else is the real problem. I would say the real problem is, in general, how we treat our fellow human beings, or more basically, man's inhumanity to man, in schools, in neighborhoods, and often also in families. You might say, well, what about this person's inhumanity? Well, think about how the community have responded to what has happened. that is also man's inhumanity to man. People don't really care about the facts. They just act on their own rhetoric in their own interests. That brings us to criminal intertextuality. Adam Lanza also targeted children. He was also a young perpetrator, just 20 years old. Have you heard of the Sandy Hook incident? In his case, he targeted an elementary school. 28 people died, including Lanza. Lanza was a mummy's boy, quiet, a loner. He had no friends. He was an outcast, a young man experiencing social death as his peers were individuating into their respective happily ever afters. Let's not forget Thomas Crooks targeted an event that was close to him, that was high profile. Did this perpetrator have anything against Taylor Swift, or was it just that the event was local to him, near to him, convenient to him, and a convenient high-profile target for a low-status, invisible mommy's boy? Does that make sense? I'm not going to take it further than that. If you'd like me to do more analysis on this particular case, let me know in the comments. Again, have a look at the book that I've written, Slaughter, dealing with these sorts of cases. I'll put a link to that in the description. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.